Varric stepped out of the silver inspection craft, his four eyes narrowing as the cold Earth air touched his scales. He had been to hundreds of planets in his long career as an inspector for the Galactic Peace Council. But humans were different. Or so the reports claimed. They were violent, unpredictable, and stubborn. The Council wanted answers. Why did humans keep winning wars they should have lost? Why did they fight like they had no fear of death? The human city around him looked calm. Tall buildings reached into the cloudy sky, and people walked with cups of steaming drinks in their hands. But Varric wasn't here for the city's peace. He was here for the scars. The marks violence had left behind. He was here to see how humans truly reacted to it. His guide was a tall human soldier named Captain Harris. The man's face was weathered, his voice calm, his handshake firm. "Welcome to Earth, Inspector," Harris said. Varric studied him, trying to see the emotions under the skin. There was nothing, no tension, no fear. Not even the polite discomfort aliens usually showed when meeting an inspector. The first stop was a war memorial. It stood in the middle of a large open square. Black stone walls covered in thousands of names. Humans of all ages were there, some placing flowers, some taking photos. A group of veterans sat on a bench nearby, laughing. Varric tilted his head, his frilled neck shifting in confusion. "Do they not mourn?" he asked Harris. "They do," Harris replied. "They just do it differently." As Varric watched, one old man told a story about losing 3 friends in the same battle. The man's voice was calm, almost casual. There was no crying, no visible pain. Varric's notes began forming in his head. Humans display no expected emotional breakdown in the presence of extreme loss. Then, the memorial's large screen lit up. A live broadcast appeared. A human space frigate under attack in the asteroid belt. Explosions filled the screen, enemy ships swarming like hungry insects. Varric expected people to gasp or panic. Instead, they simply watched. Some crossed their arms, others sipped their drinks. One woman pointed out a maneuver and said, "Smart. Move. They'll flank them from the left." Varric felt his claws tighten. "This is not normal," he whispered. Harris glanced at him. "For us, it is." The broadcast continued. A human pilot's ship took a direct hit and spun into an asteroid. The pilot's last transmission was steady, clear. "Tell my kids I went down." Fighting, no one around the screen screamed. No one looked away. A teenager even said, "That's the 3rd one this month," as if he were talking about the weather. Varric's mind was racing on his homeworld. Even trained warriors would shiver or avert their eyes at such a sight. Here, humans treated it like part of the day. He followed Harris to a small cafe near the square. Inside, the smell of roasted beans mixed with quiet chatter on one wall. A news channel replayed scenes of a recent alien siege on a human colony. The footage showed burning buildings and soldiers dragging civilians to safety. The cafe customers looked up now and then, but no one broke their conversations. A man at the counter even joked about the colony's poor weather. Varric wrote another note. Humans separate. Emotional response from violent imagery, possible adaptation. Harris finally asked, "Inspector, you look unsettled." "I am," Varric admitted. "Your people's calmness is unnatural." Harris shrugged. "It's not that we don't feel, Inspector. It's that we've learned to keep feeling out of the way when it matters." Varric didn't answer. His alien instincts told him this was more than discipline. This was something built deep into their minds. He had seen battle-hardened alien races before. The Vruan warriors who roared in rage. The Tashri assassins who moved with cold logic, but humans. They didn't roar. They didn't rage. They simply acted. That was far more dangerous. As they left the cafe, Varric's communicator chimed. A priority feed from the council appeared in his vision. Begin full observation immediately. The message read, Varrix's gaze returned to the humans in the square. They were laughing, walking, sipping drinks. All while their people fought and died light years away. Either humans had no emotions, or they had learned to bury them so deep that even death couldn't reach them. For the first time in years, Varrix felt a thin line of fear trace down his spine. He realized something dangerous. If a species could see extreme violence and stay calm, then nothing in the galaxy could truly break them. Varrix did not sleep much that night. The images of the humans at the memorial stayed in his mind. Their calm faces, their casual words while ships burned in space, he told himself. It was an act, a cultural mask, something they wore in public but removed in private. If that were true, he could prove it, and if it wasn't true, then the galaxy had underestimated these creatures in a way that could be fatal. The next morning, the air was sharp with the smell of rain as Harris led him into a secure military facility. Varrix carried a small data module in his clawed hand. The Council's archives of the most violent events recorded in the galaxy, scenes that could make even seasoned alien soldiers turn away. The humans here would be tested, their reactions measured, their emotions recorded. Harris agreed to gather a small group of soldiers and civilians for the presentation. Though he didn't know the full purpose, they assembled in a dark briefing room, rows of metal chairs facing a large screen. Varrix stood at the side, observing, his eyes recording every micro-expression. The first footage was of the Emdron Hive massacre. Thousands of insectoid civilians trapped and burned alive when their tunnels collapsed. The screams filled the room. The fire painted the walls in flickering light. A ripple of quiet passed through the humans, but no one cried out. One soldier chewed on a protein bar. Another scratched his chin. A young woman simply crossed her legs and leaned back in her chair. Varrix advanced the reel. A recording of the Scarvian civil purge appeared. Warriors tearing each other apart in blood-soaked streets. The camera shook as the recorder ran for cover. Still, the humans watched with the same steady eyes. One man tilted his head and muttered, "Poor planning, they're bottlenecking themselves," as if critiquing a chess move. Another asked Harris if the next video had sound because this one's a bit quiet. Varrix felt his frills tighten against his neck. This was not just discipline. There was no suppressed shiver, no stolen glance away from the screen. Their heart rates barely changed. They absorbed each image like water soaking into stone. He decided to push further. The final clip was something no alien had watched without flinching: the Zareth Rebellion's last stand. Captured from ground level, it showed a family shielding a child as enemy plasma burned through them. In the Council archives, this moment was marked as psychologically dangerous. The room stayed silent. The only movement was a soldier reaching for his drink. When the clip ended, Harris finally spoke. "Inspector, was that supposed to scare us?" Varrix didn't answer immediately. He was too busy feeling the strange weight in the air. Not fear, not tension, just nothing. The emptiness frightened him more than screams would have on his homeworld. Such images would leave warriors shaken for days. Here, the humans left the room talking about lunch. As they walked out, Harris glanced at him with the faintest of smirks. "You're looking for something you won't find, Inspector? What is that?" Varrix asked. "Fear." Harris said, "We put it in a box a long time ago. We only open it when we choose." The words stayed with Varrix long after the building faded from view. He realized his test had not measured emotional absence. It had measured control. The humans felt everything, but they decided when to feel it, and if they could decide. Then in battle, they would never be ruled by panic. It was a skill more terrifying than any weapon, and Varrix now knew he was only Tate. Well, Nefs now knew he was only scratching the surface of what they were capable of. Asterisk. The transport rumbled through the dusty outskirts of the human settlement, its wheels bouncing over uneven ground as Varric stared out at the horizon. A thin haze hung over the landscape, but it wasn't mist. It was smoke from distant artillery. Strikes. The sound reached them seconds later, a low, rolling thud that should have unsettled anyone in range. Yet the driver, a young human with a faint scar on his jaw, only tapped his fingers against the steering wheel to some quiet rhythm. Captain Harris sat beside Varric, speaking in his usual calm tone. "Thought you might want to see how we handle things when the enemy's still breathing?" Varric's frills twitched. "You mean a live battlefield?" "Close enough," Harris replied. "This outpost sees action every few days." The gates loomed ahead. Thick slabs of steel painted with numbers and patched repairs. Guards waved them through, rifles slung casually over their shoulders. Inside, soldiers moved with practiced ease, some hauling crates, others sitting on overturned barrels, drinking from metal mugs. No one looked nervous. Varric noticed a soldier playing cards while another stood behind him. Helmet tucked under one arm, an explosion boomed in the distance, shaking the ground. Neither man looked up from the game. Harris led Varric to a raised watch platform overlooking the perimeter. Beyond the wire fences, the ground dipped into a shallow valley scattered with scorched craters. Thin plumes of smoke marked the sites of recent shell impacts. Varric's eyes caught movement. Human patrols walking the open ground as if it were a city park. Rifles in hand, but postures relaxed. In his report notes, he wrote, "Proximity to active combat does not alter baseline behavior. A sudden crack split the air, a high-velocity shot from the enemy side. A soldier on the fence line ducked instinctively, then returned to adjusting a communications dish. Two others nearby simply shifted position and kept talking." Varric's claw tightened. "Around the railing, how are they so calm?" he muttered. Harris smirked faintly. "You get used to it, Inspector." Minutes later, a medevac truck rolled into the outpost. Inside, an injured soldier lay on a stretcher, his side wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. The man was grinning, telling the medic about how he'd managed to hit 3 targets before going down. When the medic scolded him for not ducking sooner, he laughed harder. Varric's eyes narrowed. The man wasn't faking. He was genuinely amused. A siren blared, incoming fire. Varric instinctively crouched low, scanning the sky for the threat. The humans didn't even break stride. One soldier walked past him with a sandwich in hand. Another adjusted her helmet strap. The shells hit just outside the walls, sending dirt and smoke into the air. The nearest squad simply wiped dust from their gear and resumed their tasks. Varric could feel the thrum of his own pulse, his instincts urging him to take cover. But the human's lack of reaction forced him to stay still, partly out of pride, partly out of fascination. It was as if they were wired differently. No adrenaline tremor in their hands, no wide-eyed vigilance, only precision and calm. As the smoke cleared, Harris leaned closer. "Still think we're just another warrior?" Race Varric hesitated before answering, "No. I think you might be something worse." Harris's eyes narrowed, but there was no offense in his tone. "Good," he said, and walked away to join his troops. Varric remained on the platform a moment longer. In his mind, the image of the humans, standing under fire without flinching, began to form into something else entirely, a realization that perhaps their strength was not born from the absence of fear, but from mastering it so completely that it no longer slowed them down, and that made them far more dangerous than the Council had ever imagined. The rain had started by the time Varric followed Harris to the neutral zone. Heavy drops streaked the transport's windows, turning the view outside into a blur of gray mud and razor wire. Varric's translator fed him details. Today was a prisoner exchange between humans and a rival alien faction. It was supposed to be a calm, controlled event, but he could feel the weight in the air. In most species, such tension would be visible. Shifting feet, restless hands, weapons gripped too tight. But the humans in the truck sat as if riding to a picnic, their rifles resting across their knees. Faces unreadable, they arrived at a wide stretch of churned ground between two fortified lines. The enemy stood on the far side, armored and bristling with weapons. Their movements sharp and nervous. Varix immediately spotted the difference. The aliens' eyes darted, scanning for threats. The humans? They stood in loose groups, helmets tilted back, speaking in low tones as if discussing something unrelated to war. One even adjusted the strap on his canteen with slow, deliberate fingers. It was an image that unsettled Varix far more than shouting or posturing would have. The exchange began from the human side. Prisoners were walked forward with steady steps, hands bound but chins high. From the enemy's side, captives stumbled, pushed forward by guards who clearly didn't trust the silence between the two armies. Halfway through, a prisoner from the alien side suddenly broke free. Lunging at the nearest human soldier with a concealed blade, Varix's frills flared, expecting chaos. Instead, the human sidestepped, caught the attacker's wrist, and drove him into the mud with a movement so fluid it seemed rehearsed. No shouting, no rush, just a single, efficient motion. The soldier released the attacker without a word, stepping back to his place as if nothing had happened. The enemy guards bristled, some raising their weapons. Harris didn't even look at them. He just raised a single hand and said, "Continue," and they did. Varix's pulse was hammering, but he noticed the humans' heart rates, low, steady, unchanged. The exchange finished without another incident. Within minutes, both sides were walking back to their lines. The humans moved like nothing worth remembering had happened at all. As they reached the transport, Varix turned to Harris. Why no reaction? No anger, no threat display. Harris met his gaze, rain dripping from his helmet brim, because wasting energy on emotions during the job is stupid. It wasn't arrogance in his voice. It was pure practicality. Varix stared at him. Realizing he had just witnessed something that defined human combat, they did not allow themselves to be pulled into the moment. They lived above it, outside it. That was how they kept control. As the transport rolled away, Varix looked back at the enemy line. They were still shouting orders, still glancing over their shoulders as if the humans might charge them at any second. The fear was on their side, not Earth's. Varix made a silent note for his report. Humans project dominance, not through displays of strength, but through the absence of weakness. He closed his eyes, replaying the image of the silent takedown in the mud. No wasted movement, no wasted thought. And somewhere deep in his mind, he began to wonder if the galaxy truly understood what it was dealing with. The day after the exchange, Varix joined Harris's convoy on what was supposed to be a routine inspection of supply routes. The sky was low and heavy, the air thick with the smell of wet soil. Varix sat near the front of the armored carrier, his claws resting on his knees, telling himself this was just another observation run. But the humans carried their weapons with a readiness that didn't match the routine description. They weren't tense, they were simply prepared. The way a predator rests before a hunt, the first blast came without warning. A blinding flash ripped through the tree line, followed by a shockwave that slammed into the convoy. The carrier lurched violently, throwing Varix sideways against the wall. His ears rang. His vision swam, but over it all, he could hear Harris's voice, steady as a stone. Ambush, right. Side, dismount on my mark. There was no panic in it, no raised pitch, just a command delivered as if he were announcing the time of day. The back ramp dropped, and the humans poured out. They moved like parts of the same machine, rifles. Raised eyes, scanning boots, finding solid ground despite the mud. Plasma fire cracked from the tree line, bright bursts that lit the undergrowth. Varix ducked instinctively, his heart slamming against his ribs. The humans didn't duck. They shifted position, returning fire in short, precise bursts. A figure emerged from the brush, charging with a jagged blade before Varex could even process the threat. A human soldier pivoted, put 2 rounds through the attacker's chest, and was already scanning for the next target. No hesitation. No shout of triumph, just another step in the sequence. An explosion went off behind them. But instead of looking back, the squad leader simply said, "Left flank, suppress," and the pattern shifted seamlessly. Varex tried to track all of it, the way they covered one another without speaking, the way they advanced with the same measured pace, whether under fire or in open ground. A human next to him was hit, a searing burn across the arm. Yet he only tightened his grip on the rifle and kept shooting until Harris tapped him to fall back for treatment. Even then, the injured man walked, not ran. It was as though pain had been downgraded in their minds to a mild inconvenience. Within minutes, the forest went quiet. The surviving attackers had melted away, leaving only scorched ground and bodies cooling in the rain. The humans reloaded calmly, checked one another for injuries, and began moving again as if nothing had happened. Varex, still catching his breath, stared at them in disbelief. On any other world, survivors of an ambush would be trembling, voices shaking, movements erratic. Here, it was just business. Harris approached, his helmet under one arm. Steam rising from the wet armor plates. "You all right, Inspector?" Varex nodded slowly. "I believe so." Harris's eyes narrowed slightly. Reading the truth, Varex didn't speak, that the alien's pulse was still pounding. "Don't worry," Harris said. "You'll get used to it." If you live long enough, the convoy rolled. On engines growling in the damp air, Varex looked out the side hatch. Watching the trees slide past, for the first time, he began to understand that what unsettled him wasn't just human calm. It was the way they seemed to compress every feeling, every reaction, into a sealed core deep inside themselves. They didn't waste it. They released it only when it served them, and in battle, that made them unstoppable. He had come to Earth expecting to study a dangerous species. Now he wondered if he was sitting inside the most efficient killing force the galaxy had ever produced. And they hadn't even been trying to impress him yet. Asterisk Night had fallen over. The outpost, the rain from earlier, had turned the ground into a dark, slick mess. Reflecting the pale glow of the floodlights, Varex walked the perimeter alone, his thoughts circling the same question over and over. How could they face death like that and remain untouched? The ambush from earlier still replayed in his mind in perfect detail, not because of the violence, but because of the complete absence of fear in the humans' faces. It was unnatural. It was alien. He found Harris in the motor pool, standing beside a half-dismantled transport, oil streaked on his gloves. The captain was working silently, a cigarette clamped in the corner of his mouth. Varex approached, his claws clicking against the metal floor. "Captain," he began, his voice sharper than intended, "I need to understand what I saw today." Harris didn't look up. "Which part?" "All of it," Varex said. "The calm during the attack, the lack of emotion when your soldier was wounded, the way none of you even blinked when you killed." Harris wiped his hands on a rag, then leaned back against the transport, studying Varex for a long moment. "You think we don't feel anything?" he asked quietly. Varex hesitated. "I think. If you do, you hide it so deep that it might as well not exist." Harris gave a short, humorless laugh. "That's not hiding, Inspector. That's discipline." Varex tilted his head. "Discipline." Harris took a slow drag of the cigarette, the ember glowing in the dim light. "Fear, anger, grief, all of it slows you down when you're in the middle of something that can kill you." He said, "Every soldier here has learned the same lesson. You don't let those things drive you. You put them in a box, lock it, and throw the key somewhere you can't reach until the job's done." "But why?" Varex pressed. Other species use fear to survive, to move faster. To strike harder, Harris shook his head. Fear makes you reckless, and recklessness gets people killed. He glanced toward the open night, where the floodlights lit. The misty air, we've been killing each other for thousands of years. Inspector, we got very good at it, at some point. We realized the best killers weren't the ones screaming in rage or shaking in terror. They were the ones who stayed cold enough to think. The words sank into Varric like a slow poison. It wasn't that humans lacked emotion. They had simply weaponized control over it, and if a species could decide when to feel, then no outside force could manipulate them. Harris flicked the cigarette into the darkness and pushed off from the transport. "You want to know the truth?" he asked, his voice dropping. "When the fight's over, when we're safe, that's when it hits us all at once. Some drink, some laugh. Some cry until they can't breathe. But not out there." He jabbed a finger toward the black horizon. "Never out there." Varric realized then that the calm he had witnessed wasn't a lack of humanity. It was humanity forged into something sharper than any blade. The Council's reports had called humans dangerous. They hadn't even begun to understand why. As Harris walked away into the shadows, Varric remained by the transport, the faint smell of oil and rain mixing in the air. He thought about the locked box Harris had described. He wondered what would happen if something ever made all of humanity. Open that box at once. The idea chilled him more than any weapon he had ever inspected. The transport lifted from the human outpost before dawn, its engines rumbling low as it climbed through a thin veil of fog. Varric sat alone in the rear compartment, the vibration of the hull steady under his claws. Outside, the planet's surface fell away into a dark, endless stretch of clouds. He was leaving Earth behind, but he knew the images he had collected here would follow him for the rest of his life. The Galactic Peace Council had demanded a full and immediate report. They wanted details of human combat readiness, behavioral patterns, weaknesses. Varric had come expecting to find flaws, fragility, panic, the emotional instability that most species carried into violence. Instead, he had found something worse. Humans did not erase their emotions. They had mastered them, locked them away like weapons in an armory, ready to be drawn only when it suited them. He replayed the key moments in his mind. The memorial crowd watching ships die in silence. The soldiers under fire treating explosions like background noise. The takedown in the mud during the prisoner exchange. The ambush where calm precision had crushed chaos in minutes. Every scene felt unnatural, yet undeniably effective. It was no longer a question of whether humans could fight. It was a question of what they would do when they decided to, as the transport broke atmosphere. Varric opened his report log. His claws hovered over the input panel for several seconds. The standard council language suddenly felt too small, too safe. He typed slowly. Recommendation: do not provoke the human species under any circumstances. They do not react to extreme violence as other species do. They are not guided by fear, nor slowed by grief. Their calm in battle is not absence of feeling. It is control beyond our comprehension. He hesitated, then added one final note. If war ever comes to them, they will not rise to meet it. They will already be standing there, waiting. The hatch behind him hissed open. Harris stepped inside. No armor now, just fatigues and that same unreadable expression. "You're going to tell them we're dangerous?" Harris said, not as a question. Varric met his gaze. "Yes." Harris gave a faint smile, one that carried no humor. "Good," he said. "They should be when the transport docked with the orbital station." Varric lingered at the hatch, staring out at the pale curve of Earth below. From here it looked quiet, harmless, the illusion that had fooled the galaxy for too long. He turned away, the thought pressing hard in his mind that perhaps humans' greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their armies. It was the fact that when the killing started, they didn't become something else. They simply became more of what they already were. And somewhere deep inside, Varix knew that one day the galaxy would push too far. And on that day, the humans would open the box and no one, not even the council, would be ready for what came out.